I'm Roshan James. I'm a local poet and artist, and I'm here to talk to Sara and Marshall on the Bonn Park podcast. What peace do we offer trees when we walk among them? Do they hear our tread or breath first, bearing our souls? Do they hush and close their spiritual eyes when our sighs scent the breeze? What does our peace mean to them?
Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Can you do us a favor?
Can you please leave us a 5-star review, like or subscribe to our show, and share with your friends? We'd also love it if you followed us on social media.
We are a homegrown community project, and every bit helps. On with the show, this is it.
Speechless to our ears, theirs is a language of shade unspoken, dark, umbrous alchemy, in changing greens and whispering leaves, light and breath transition. There is no idle chatter among them. Their talk is of communion. Pull the blanket of tree talk, closeness wraps around our shoulders, where rest is found under thickness of forest sound.
Roshan James, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sara and Marshall.
This is a funny connection because this is one of those cold Instagram messages like, hey, I've got this show. Do you want to come on it? So first I had seen one of your pieces, which is People of Color, on Instagram. And I think it was from City on a Hill Art. Is it City on a Hill? Yeah, Art.
That's right.
I had seen it and I didn't know what I was looking at first. I showed this piece to Marshall and it's just beautiful. It's just lines and color. And there's definitely like depth of field to it. And it just made me happy. And I really liked it. And I thought, this is amazing. And then I saw the title and I realized that it's also important. And it was so gorgeous. And so I just said to Marshall, there's this painter, I want to have her on the show. I think that she'd, be a great guest. And then, no, you're also an author of 3 different books. You have a day job. You're creating art all over the place. So you're doing tasking in the creative world, as far as I'm concerned. Great. And you were so kind to answer my message and say, yeah, I'd love to talk to you guys. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I really appreciate you reaching out, and I'm so curious to hear what your questions will be. There's lots to dig into, of course.
Tons to dig into. Yeah. And you're author of 3 different books. We just took a fun screenshot. I'll just tell everyone, maybe we'll include it when we post the show. We just took a fun screenshot of all of us holding our copies of Breaking. I picked mine up down at Wordsworth Books in Waterloo, one of my favorite places. And man, do I love this one. But you're also, you have Art of the Unknown. And then This Is My Story, My Song as well. Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful pieces. But I want to start where the connection started, like this painting. What was the inception? Have you always been a painter?
So it's so interesting because my grandfather actually taught me to paint when I was very, very little. And it's always just been part of what I did. So similar to poetry, similar to story writing and other creative outlets, but I never saw it as like something to do like officially, like as a job or a career or anything like that. And it was always just an outlet, really, like an expressive outlet and a way to help me process through different stages of life and that type of thing. But going through so many ups and downs through life, inevitably I started coming back to creativity more and more as really the way that I got through some pretty sticky situations and rough patches. And then I started painting at the beginning of last year. I had been writing lots of poetry over the years, definitely going deeper on that side of things. Had kind of dabbled in visual arts along the way, but then for some reason last year we just decided we needed to carve out an art studio space because my husband, Patrick, he's also a visual artist, and it just felt like the right time for us to do that. We were changing some things up in the house, and so we took one of the garage spaces and we're like, okay, this is going to be our dedicated space for art. And I hadn't tried oil painting just yet. It always intimidated me. It was like the really serious kind of painting. And a friend of mine had given me an oil painting set like probably 15 years ago, and clearly I hung on to it for sentimental reasons. And also because I was like, one day I'm going to try it and I'll get down to it. So dug that out last year and started with oils. And it just literally felt like just the most natural thing in the world. Like it just really clicked for me. It felt like I had been doing it before. It was just the most surreal experience. And so then I started working on different paintings, and with everything that has been going on in terms of, increasing awareness around anti-racism and the important work that needs to continue to be done on that front, and how much more focused we are as a community on this specific issue, especially like through the last couple of years, I was processing through, different moments of, trying to just really reflect on my personal experience as the person of color and what this, growing dialogue in the community meant to me, what I could contribute to it. I was really weighing out some of these heavier thoughts and heavier reflections. And inevitably it started coming through in my art. But the one thing that I didn't want to do was have it come out as bitterness or sort of, there's definitely healing that needs to happen. But for me, it was really important to focus on bringing out more of the experiences of joy and things that are important to acknowledge and celebrate as we continue to push forward with this really important work on the anti-racism front. So that's where I wanted to show progression, a lot of bold colors, but also a playfulness in how I mix together the heads and the bodies and the placement on the canvas. So that's kind of how it was conceptualized. And then I built out a few more pieces and I'm starting to work on a broader collection around that specific theme.
I think you achieved that too through just the surface quality. It looks like you paint in a very acrylic-like kind of way. You use oils as though you were painting with acrylics.
Yeah, it's interesting calling that out. So for me, I really love the feel of how oil painting feels like sculpting, essentially, because you can layer and build and create so much texture. And even within like a small area of painting, you can create a lot of movement and emotion too through that. And that really spoke to me, and I loved playing around with that. I loved using acrylics for the longest time too. So maybe that sort of feeds into how I'm approaching the oil painting, but I'm 100% like self-taught. So we'll say that too, that this was a huge experiment for me. But yeah, it felt very natural to kind of.
As Sarah pointed out, there's this amazing field of depth in that piece called People. And it's what's so compelling about it to me is there's just barely enough information provided that the viewer just can fill in the blanks. Yeah. But it's clear as day. I think everybody will read it as those are people and they're descending into a background.
Which mirrors also your landscapes and farmscapes that you have as well, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, the landscapes, that too, just it seems like a simple topic, I guess. Like I look at a lot of my pieces and I'm like, they're not complex in that they're not like intentionally layered stories. I think that ends up coming through like after I start working on them and just the thoughts that I have as I'm painting. But initially I'm like, you know what, I love this vignette in my mind that I captured like while we were out on a drive of a specific farm field, and it just sticks in my mind and like I have to paint it, and I almost know when those moments are. So I'll sort of freeze frame that in my mind, come back to the studio, start working on something. And it usually is like a bit of a hyperbole of a very small slice of actual ground in the foreground, and then more so focusing on the horizon and the sky. Because to me out here, like what I love so much about living out here in the country is that we just see the horizon line from one end of our field of view to the other. And the sky is just massive and expansive. And it just feels so like freeing and, untethered. And it really increases your sense of awe and wonder just on a daily basis. So I found, painting those simple paintings, like I said, as I was painting, then I would sort of be layering intention and meaning as I built them out. And I think that sort of starts to come through as people look at the texture and the movement, especially in the sky paintings.
I wanted to ask Sarah, didn't you find that looking at Roshan's work that they walk this line between representational abstract and then pure abstraction?
Totally.
Yeah.
And when you were talking about oils versus acrylics, there was such a thickness to the paint. Yeah. And I know you talk about that often, about layering, because Marshall is an artist and I've painted stuff, but no one's ever going to see, what I mean? But Marshall's doing the real deal. That's true. Never say never, right?
I always think they're so painterly. They're like painting about painting,
Right. Right. And then something that Roshan said just now, I was thinking about you, Marshall, that I see something and I'm inspired when I'm out. Did that play into your work as well?
For sure. Yeah.
Because I feel that way with photography. Photography is my tool for sure, my medium. But I was wondering with painters, like, is it life? It's everything together then. Is it life experience, a message, something you've seen? So I don't know if you watch Modern Family, but Mitchell, when he was really into painting, he's just like, how much paint I have left, because that's also, if you're on a roll.
Or I think, and even though you're not classically trained, you intuitively know how to divide up a canvas by like 2/3 and a third, right? I guess you also, do you stretch the canvas over panel like a board? And
it's over just a typical gallery frame.
Yeah.
So I just buy them sort of pre-stretched already. But yeah, they're usually fairly deep profile wise because I like that chunky profile. I think it sets it out really nicely on the wall.
Yeah, they're almost sculptural, right? Once you put them on the wall.
Yes. Yeah. And I love painting around the edges too. So
and the canvas holds better. Oh, sorry to speak over you.
Oh, it does.
Right? Like on a thin frame, even when people get like a canvas of a photograph printed on a very thin frame, it does end up getting a warble through seasons and temperature change. But on a thick frame, it's got to be pulled tighter. Sorry, Marshall, I just elbowed you there. Yeah. It's got to be pulled tighter. So yeah.
It's true. Yeah, it feels sturdier, I think, overall as a structure. And especially for oil painting, because it has such a heavy feel to it. The specific technique is impasto technique. So it's that, really heavy use of paint and sort of carving into it to create that texture and that movement. I was going to say something about the wrapped edges because I do like bleeding over, but not always consistently. So I like the idea of having kind of a rough edge or rough elements even within the composition of the piece, because to me, it feels like that really is what life is. Like it's always sort of like a little bit open around the edges and constantly building. And there's that sense of like, maybe there's something else to come, and it leaves it a bit open for interpretation.
There's a local artist named Behnaz Fatami, who was a guest on our show, and she spoke quite a bit about the need to bring writing into her visual artwork. And I love that relationship if it works in a very natural way. And clearly you found a way to find great joy in both writing and painting.
Yeah, it's interesting actually that you mentioned that, because one of the pieces that I recently finished, I actually did write a poem, like not previously written. So I wrote it live, I guess you would say, right onto the canvas. And it just sort of emerged and became part of the art piece itself. And then I included almost like, from like early cartoons or like the Batman series where they do like the pow and the bam and all the cartoon letters. So I was trying to like introduce an element of that sort of like comic style or like comic style into the piece as well. Because I find there's a bit of like a pop art feel that kind of comes out in that. And I like the juxtaposition between that and the more serious, almost like traditionally treated object in a painting. So it almost ends up being like a collage within the painting itself.
Before we started recording here, we were talking about, Marshall was bringing up the sense of time and it being, can you say it actually, Marshall?
Oh, just how the pandemic has really played with our sense of time. Mm-hmm. Some of us might just be realizing it now after all this time that we're starting to lose, something that's kind of internal about just keeping track of time, and things start to blur together.
And that something else that I personally have felt, and I'm sure everyone has, is when you see a gathering of people, or like even in a movie or a TV show, or we were joking with Ren Navarro the one day, her podcast, Ren Likes to Talk. It starts with a busy restaurant or a busy bar, and you can hear the glasses clinking and the cutlery going and people talking. And I had that same kind of, even though I felt so much joy looking at people of color, the first one that I saw, I also had that feeling of that's a lot of people in one painting. It's just the gathering thing. It's a little unsettling to me still. And it's just because we've all been in our homes and been quiet for so long,
It's been a very quiet time. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where people have been reflecting more, evaluating what's important in life right now. We're hearing on the work front, like through my corporate day job, we're aware of people who are just, not realizing that they've maybe done things for so long just because they thought they had to. And now they have the time and the space to just think differently, essentially, and see if they can move in a different direction. It's a very fascinating time for me in general.
Roshan, I think your poetry book, Breaking, is actually a very quiet book. And that's what I really find the beauty in it. If you don't mind, I'll just read one little piece here.
Oh, yeah.
It says, we run red lights from exhaustion. Maybe we'll get there. So this really, really spoke to me. I remember my brother who lived in an outport in Newfoundland with no cars.
Hi, David.
No vehicles, yeah. And David came back to Ontario after quite some time. So imagine living in an outport with no vehicles. And I was driving him down Victoria Street. And I went through 3 yellow lights each at a time. And I thought nothing of it. And David was probably experiencing a lot of things being back in Ontario. But he says, hey, what's the rush, right? Like, and I didn't think I was. And I tried to explain.
You're the least rushiest person I know.
Yeah.
I mean that was a compliment.
Yeah, thank you. And I tried to explain, I said, well, it's like the energy of the city. It's like there's something that's moving us faster forward. And I truly was not trying to get anywhere too fast, but my mind and body have adopted to the culture of driving in Waterloo region. And I really appreciated my brother pointing it out to me. And, but it's amazing to me how in such a succinct, brief way, you express something that has given me hours to ponder. Mm-hmm. That's incredible. Such a small, simple bit of text, eh?
Thank you so much. It's interesting because when I first started writing poetry, I found that I was writing shorter pieces, and that was just me and what was coming out. And I often felt like it wasn't maybe enough because you start to evaluate other poets and how they write, and you hear people say, oh, like I like this about it or I like that about it, but maybe it could be longer. And for me, because I'm so sensitive, like I internalize everything. So it took yes. Everybody raise their hand.
Yeah, everybody raise your hand.
Sensitive out there, listeners. Like it was like journey upon journey to kind of realize that what I put out is sufficient, and leaving that room and space, because I am a very quiet person. Like, it's so interesting that you caught on to that, Marshall. you know, feeling like you need to say more, do more, be more, move faster, all the mores. It takes a long time to realize that you can just pull back from all of that. And I think the more that I did focus on my poetry and building my voice, that's where I started to enjoy it even more. So it's so interesting. You put down some of like the false mores, and then you actually get more abundance in the things that really do satisfy and the things that really are you at the end of the day.
Oh, I love this term that you just used, this false mores. I'm like, oh yeah, that one hits home a little bit, because you have to remind yourself sometimes about that. Yeah. You do get caught up in it sometimes.
I was thinking of you, Sarah. You must see many things about yourself in that book that.
Oh my gosh.
Roshan
Yeah. You can probably see it's the Breaking Book Club, everybody.
Yeah. But I found myself thinking about Sarah and other people in my life. Who I thought, if they were to see this, they probably would see something that I see in them. I wonder if they see it in themselves. Right.
I read it in the car on the way home. I wasn't driving from Wordsworth. And then I took time to read it again. I went through it very quickly the first time because I was sort of eating it like a slice of pizza. I was so excited. And then
that's amazing.
Then I had time to sit back and reflect, as Marshall said. And when did this one, it's obviously the type of work that is one piece, but you can consider one page or 2 pages as a little work, right? As a little body of work, or as their own separate poem. And this one here on page.
Sometimes one sets up the next one.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And the one that I'm thinking of is the series in here, or the sections in here that start with "I'm in here." And on page 57, follow along, listeners. On page 57, there's a piece here that says, "I'm in here trying not to put my fists through my own walls." Dramatic, they say. Aggressive, they say. Calm down, they say. I'll just stay in here. And poof, this one speaks to me so much. I don't even know where to start. I mean, you obviously have your own reasons for writing this, but for me, even today, I was struggling this morning with just some ideas of, I'm working too hard. I'm not working hard enough. I'm having too much fun. Oh, you're never fun. Like all of those types of things in one ball, where you're just like, it's like locking yourself in the bathroom. I talk about this with parenting. Marshall and I were both stay-at-home, work-at-home parents, and that's how we met at a park in our local neighborhood. And I just tell this story that there were a few days when my kids were like, 2 little toddlers, and I would just lock myself in the bathroom for about 5 minutes and just take a minute, just take a second to regroup myself. And in the same way, as an adult, sometimes I have that feeling like I need to stand back from all of this noise that I'm hearing and I don't know, and decide what it is that I need, or that I want to present, or that I don't want to give to anybody in this moment.
Oh, that's so powerful, Sarah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love overwhelmed.
Well, like so I'll say it almost brought tears to my eyes. Like I was holding back tears hearing you read the poem, because it's just something, it takes your breath away when you hear others respond to it and pick up on things, and then hear how it reflects what they've experienced. But there's like no greater sense of like satisfaction, I think, as a writer. That's pretty amazing. So thank you both so much, because to hear you both read the poems.
It's a very reassuring book in terms of, it kind of tells you it's okay. And if that's where you are, that's all right.
I felt that
there's some pieces where I said to Sarah the other day, I gave her an example of, sometimes I wake up like at a weird time in the night, like 3 or 4 in the morning. You can suddenly just feel overwhelmed by something, which isn't the way you should be feeling at that time. Right. Your thoughts should be simple, and then you should go back to sleep. And it's amazing how these feelings can be right there and be very present. And there's no distraction because it's night and it's dark and you see the digital clock. And I feel like the book kind of says, almost like a pat on the back, like it's okay if that's where you're at right now. You have to work through something to get, somewhere else.
That's 100% it, because inevitably, like, we're not ever there, whatever there means, like that, whatever that there is that we're trying to get to. We're always working through something, moving through a space, moving through a chapter, moving through some sort of life experience, whether it's like good or bad or whatever in between. And really, all of that is 100% okay. And I firmly believe that everything does happen for a reason, but not in a trite way. Like it's heavier than that, and we're learning, and sometimes those lessons aren't palatable. They aren't the lessons we wanted to learn. Maybe we didn't choose them, but we do choose how we get through those situations. And sometimes it's okay to just say that it's not okay, and I just need to lie down, or I'm awake at 3 a.m. in the morning with spinning thoughts. And I've 100% been there many, many, many times.
Yeah, there's one that opens talking about fluidity, and it kind of ends with the fact that we are moving mountains. We're not just these stagnant.
Yeah. Yes,
but also so insignificant at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's in there too, right? That's so neat, because we just Sarah and I read a book called "The End of the Universe," astrophysically speaking. I thought there's a poem in here that actually would go great with that book.
It's about it's written by Dr. Katie Mack, and it's about how in 5 billion years the Earth will end as a crusty little clump of fire.
Yeah.
So how do we reconcile with the day-to-day, the mundane of like just, getting up, having breakfast, getting kids ready? If you've got kids to get ready in the morning, we do. So everything you're saying about being parents resonates with us. And just moving through your workday or whatever that day looks like. And then you realize, and you look up at the stars and you look up at the sky, and you're like, there's so much more out there. And so much of it is 100% unknown. We have the answers that we think get close to what everything means, but I still think we're guessing at best. And it's humbling. I think it's good to kind of have to go back and forth in your mind, between the day-to-day and those bigger thoughts. And that's perhaps what helps us sort of create things like hope in ourselves and resilience.
I'm just your fool, can't help myself, still love you, baby.
Marshall, let's take a moment to hear from this week's sponsor, the Mel Brown Music Festival and Symposium. We're going to be hearing from Lee Willingham. He's a professor of music at Wilfrid Laurier and also the director of the Laurier Center for Music in the Community. Then we're going to be hearing from Carlos Morgan. Carlos is a Canadian soul and rhythm blues singer. He's most noted for winning the Juno Award for Best R&B Soul Recording at the Juno Awards of 1997 for his album Feelin' Alright. Carlos is also responsible for the inception of the Mel Brown Music Festival and Symposium and key to its role in our community. He is the curator and artistic director of the event. So blues legend Mel Brown was the driving force behind a blues revival in our area. Mr. Brown brought the sound of the Mississippi Delta to Waterloo region. As a renowned guitarist, Mel Brown collaborated with great acts like Etta James and B.B. King, among others, and decided to put his roots down right here. And his adopted hometown of the Waterloo region loved Mel Brown. In an interview, when asked how he'd like to be remembered, Mel Brown said, "If my music could touch somebody's heart and bring you closer to love, then that would be it." People need to take time to think about what love is and how they can insert their love into life. Now let's hear more from the organizers.
Thank you, and it's great to be here with you and with my good colleague, Carlos Morgan.
Yes.
We're really excited about a whole bunch of things around this festival and symposium that address what we think is something really missing in our community, and that is a focus on a feature of Black culture and Black music with some incredible artists and creative people. And connected to that is the legacy that Mel Brown left us by his influence and his generosity in accepting people of all backgrounds and musical experiences to sit in with him, to learn from him. This festival and symposium was born out of an idea that really came from Carlos around elevating music. But then I took it to the level of, well, how can I, as a white privileged person in a position of power in a university, how can we address what we think are systemic issues in our university? And the key issue, the elephant in the room, if you will, is that our program privileges the music of Eurocentric white composers, most of whom are dead, and a little bit of jazz. I have to say, though, that since the opening of our community music program, there's been a wider lane for musical genres of all different backgrounds and styles. That to say, there's still an imbalance in the racial makeup of our professors and our student body. Carlos, I really am grateful to be working with you, and I value what you're doing already in this project that is making it come alive and making it exciting for our community.
Well, thank you, Lee. This is very exciting. I'm honored and I'm grateful to be a part of a team of people who share this vision, bringing and highlighting and featuring Black music in Kitchener-Waterloo with Mel Brown and his legacy and his indelible musical contributions that he brought with him, and his history and his knowledge of music, blues, and what he did for the community here. Building upon his foundation, building upon the roots that he brought to Kitchener-Waterloo through his music and his passion of music and so on. There's a 3-day festival happening May 27th to 29th, and happening at 3 different locations. The Jazz Room on May 27th, the KPL, Kitchener Public Library, on the 28th, and the museum on the 29th. It's going to be featuring different musical acts of different genres of music, Black music, which will include a blues, and we're happy and delighted to and proud to say that Miss Angel Brown will be the headliner for the whole festival. So she'll be performing along with Errol Blackwood, the Waterloo Region Mass Choir, Alicia Brilla, Jolene Rita, Rufus John, Akaya, and hopefully we'll have Glenn Lewis, a Grammy Award winner, and Miranda Love, who's also a Juno Award winner, performing the whole weekend. So we're going to be focusing on and highlighting these aspects of Black music, which again was built upon the foundation of Mr. Mel Brown in the Kitchener-Waterloo region.
The Mel Brown Music Festival and Symposium runs from Friday, May 27th to Sunday, May 29th. Tickets are available at melbrownfestival.ca. We'll link to the website in our show notes. And now back to the show.
Do you ever look at the page and it's like sometimes just 12 words occupy one page? Do you ever think about that? That those are your words? Like you deliberately picked each one of those words. You might have labored over that poem for a long time. It might have looked very different at the beginning, but in the end, once you published it, it's maybe a dozen words and it occupies an entire page. That's a lot of space around those little words, but they're yours, right?
Well, that goes back to, feeling comfortable to own that space and say, yes, this is enough. Because I'm constantly battling that urge to put more in there and say more or get more specific, because I'm not 100% sure if somebody's going to understand the abstraction of the piece. So that's been part of the learning and just experiencing through it, is like figuring out and becoming more intuitive about where to just stop or where to pare a little bit back. And I do find that even the experience of writing a piece of poetry is much like sculpting or carving, because I feel like I throw a bunch of stuff out there and then I start peeling layers back, and it is like I'm doing this gesture, like this carving gesture, because it is what it feels like inside when I'm going through the editing process.
That hits home with me. I mean, I feel that way about the creation because I edit this show. I feel that way about the show. We can't leave everything in. Sometimes we talk to somebody for a couple hours, Don't worry, we won't keep you that long. But like you're often peeling things back from that. And Marshall's a writer and an artist. You can definitely relate. I'm doing that with the camera all the time, where I'm looking at what's inside the lens and then I'm repositioning to omit things because it's too much most of the time. And you're trying to keep it more simple than that. And yeah, I know, Marshall, when you're going through your writing editing process, same thing. Do you get that sculpting feeling, or do you feel like you see it beforehand? Yeah, it's very, it's amazing how much, in my case, when I write a newspaper column, I have a maximum of 550 words. And sometimes the first draft is 650. And I think, well, I can't cut anything out of here. It's all incredibly important for the story I'm trying to tell. And then you realize that once you have to do it, you do it. It's actually much better for it. I'm sure that's the case with poetry, right? Yeah. I love the fact that in a case like your poetry book, the most amount of text is on the back of the book. that's pretty awesome.
That's where I explain everything. So I'm like, okay, this is what it's all about.
Here's how we use it.
Yes, exactly. I find that mood, especially because when you're creating these pieces or you're going through the creative process, it really is about like a mood that you want to convey. And mood is such a delicate thing conceptually. Like I feel I'm holding my hand like this because I feel like when you have a mood or a feeling, it's so ephemeral and then you're trying to translate it into something concrete. So how do you do that in the most delicate way? And that's where I think really spending time with it and kind of grooming it and paring it back and just giving it its way of breathing is so important. But I've only figured that out after bumping along the way and creating some clunky pieces too, where afterwards I publish it and I'm like, I don't know, it just feels like it's just a little too, there's like too much in it, or there's just pieces that aren't as like polished or refined or soft as they could be.
Is a really minimal, I'm talking about a really minimal poem. Is it kind of sometimes just even crafted in your head before it even hits the paper? I don't assume that every poem is sat at a computer, you looking at a blank page going, I'm going to write a poem now. I figure some of these come to life while you're driving or walking.
Yes.
And,
oh my gosh.
And you actually create it and build it within your head before it's ever put down somewhere, right?
Yes. Usually when I'm driving, when I'm walking, I pretty much nailed it. When I'm in the shower and when I'm halfway asleep. So all of these moments where I can't actually like write the thing down.
And you're forced to be alone in those moments.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they're very quiet, alone moments, which is good because I do need that for just thinking in general and focusing. But yeah, there's usually moments where I'm like, okay, this is short, so it's good. So I'll remember it. I won't forget it because that has happened before. But yeah, sometimes there's just these nuggets that kind of come to mind, and there's just a knowing that that is the complete thing. And I just have to jot it down and then put it out there.
What blows me away is how something so succinct can come out of a life that must be full of clutter, like everybody else's life, right? Like your thoughts are, there's a million thoughts a day. There's noise around you. All of us, right? There's just so much around us, yeah. and yet somehow you can filter through it all and achieve this. Doesn't that? Do you ever reflect on that and think, wow, how that's amazing how that's done, and all their stuff goes away and this is left, right?
Thank you for saying that. I feel like, yeah, it's interesting because that breaking, I still wasn't sure how it would hit people. I wasn't sure if it was too quiet, at risk of being boring even, but then people started to respond to it, and to hear both of you respond to it is, incredibly encouraging. Yeah, I would say like these days, I do meditate a lot. Like I would say that I really try to adhere to this concept of total meditation, where you're trying to be mindful and meditative pretty much like through every cycle of the day. That takes a ton of time to sort of work on, become disciplined in. Early days, I would say, yeah, lots of competing thoughts. I was doing art at the fringes of life, if I was doing it at all. So really, like my corporate job was the focus, family life was the focus. And then you go through a bunch of things that really shake things up, and you do have to get clear on what is the priority and what is your mental state like, and what is your mental health like, and overall wellness. And I went through a process of getting to a place where it's more and more quiet, and I can focus in on certain subjects and contemplate and then write. But yeah, it hasn't always been like that.
I've shown Sarah this book I really love. It's called The Mindful Writer by Dinty Timur, a professor down in the US. It's a little red book, and it's written from a very, he's not a Buddhist, but it's written from a Buddhist perspective, and it has lots of quotes in it. Often there's a quote, and then there's a little paragraph by him kind of playing off that quote or adding something of his own thoughts to it. And the thing I took away from that book more than anything is the idea that when you're writing, to really question the purity of what it is you're writing, and to make sure that what you're doing is not being, I guess, maybe influenced or possibly even poisoned by another agenda, by something else you're trying to do and say, other than just be very pure and honest in your thoughts. I'm just paraphrasing. That's what I took away from it. But that really getting down to your most honest, authentic, pure self. And I guess that was a process probably for you in your writing journey too, right?
It continues to be, I would say. I I don't know if that would ever end. I love that, by the way. That just like really struck a chord. Yeah, I think like that deepening of awareness, the expansion of consciousness, like all of that is something that I've been trying to grow my understanding of more. I would say through this poetry and visual art journey, I thought I knew where I was, even from a spiritual standpoint. Like I thought that I had things sort of like locked down and figured out, and grew up in a very traditional home that way, and had a lot of like unconditioning to do and stripping away to do, and then figuring out actually like sort of what was what. And that's where I think like I reflect on that and know that there's just still more and more to do, and there always will be. But yeah, mindfulness as a writer, I don't know that you can be, well, sorry, I should step back for a second. You can write without being mindful, obviously, but the more mindful you are, I think the more true you are to what you are trying to express. And it really is agenda free at that point, where there's really pure and specific focus on what you're trying to convey.
This makes so much sense to me. And also with what you were saying earlier about spending time meditating, which is not something I do intentionally, but I'm working harder and harder to think of my intentions and to focus on tasks at hand, even if they are just driving or just, preparing to meet Marshall for our projects, or being with my children, or getting some exercise. And I noticed on your Instagram just recently, you posted something that said, I think it was recently, intention is powerful energy. And at almost 46 years old, I keep saying I'm 45, but now I get to say I'm almost 46, almost 46 years old. This is something I'm just learning now. And again, totally thought I had what I thought figured out, totally thought I knew who I was. And just now thinking and realizing, unless I sit down and intend what I want to do and who I want to be, and unless I take those moments, however mundane, but to be mindful in them, I'm lost and possibly spinning out of control. I mean, I never really get out of control. I'm pretty boring, but out of control from the neck up. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes,
I was talking to my teenage daughters last night, and they were both mentioning that that I overthink everything. And I said, well, yeah, I do, but it doesn't go anywhere. I'm just constantly overthinking everything, and it's spinning my wheels all the time. Like Marshall was saying, waking up with this energy of heavy thoughts, but you didn't ask for them. You were just minding your own business, sleeping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet they are your thoughts.
Yet they're there. Yep.
From within you.
They're like, Marshall, wake up.
That's it.
I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I'm thinking.
I actually hear somebody's voice in the night, call my name.
I hear that sometimes too.
It's not there.
Mm-hmm. It's myself, I think.
Yeah.
It is.
So,
Oh, really?
It's yourself. Yeah. Because you don't recognize your voice.
Yeah.
I think about the artwork that you went with for your book, and what a perfect pairing, this very simple, it's in so many ways, a circle, which for me also can look like a sun, right? And the way it's just almost like moving very slowly, quietly across the sky. How did you come to settle on that artwork that so perfectly represents the writing inside?
Thank you again. I sort of just had a vision of it. As soon as the title, and this has happened, I think, with each of the books, I knew it was a thing. I knew I was going to write it, and I knew what it looked like. And I don't know why that happened the way that it did. It just did. The same thing happened with Art of the Unknown. I knew what the title was. I jotted it down in the margins of my notebook while I was writing some other pieces, and I knew I was going to come back to it. And there's just something around that. I'm like, it seemed to be a crystallization of all the things and the topics and the reflections that I was already writing about. It's like I was pre-writing it, and then the title came, and then I continued writing it, and then I scooped it all up and then packaged it into this thing. And I just saw the cover, and it was just very big and simple too at the same time. Same thing for Breaking. It made sense to me because it felt like the break of day. It felt like that's sort of an interesting time for me too, because it can sort of feel like the end of something and the beginning of something.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, like there's a mood to it. Sometimes the morning mood is a little bit, melancholy, and that's okay. And as a poet, I love the melancholy space, like anything kind of like dark and broody.
Yep.
Kind of really feeds my soul. But yeah, I don't think a lot of people know this, but my name means new light, as in like morning light. And my mom used to talk to me about that when I was a kid, and it always felt like something special to me. And I feel like, or I felt like with breaking, that was a moment to kind of bring more of myself into that piece in that symbolic way.
Is it not painful being in some social situations where when you're someone who thinks so deeply and thoughtfully, to be able to put it out in like either in the form of poetry or art, and then you find yourself in situations where sometimes you're surrounded by people who are all just talking about things on a very surface level, right? And
is this something you speak of?
Yeah,
often?
Mm-hmm. So sometimes with like we're talking to neighbors or whatnot, and within moments, as soon as you say something that's maybe a little bit more introspective or maybe trying to explore a part of your spirit or soul, you can make people uncomfortable, and you can see it when you've done it, right? And then you try to, and then you go back to that place where, I guess we're talking about the snow at the end of the driveway, right?
Right.
Your new kitchen, or
whatever
it might be.
Yeah, it's I'm not trying to say poor us. I'm just trying to say it can leave you sometimes walking away feeling a little bit alienated, right?
It's such a good thing to talk about, actually. Because I have noticed in myself over time, like I was great at extroverting when I was younger. I was very social, loved being out and about, going out with friends, all of that. And for work, like I was used to kind of being on always. So always presenting, always, speaking in front of leaders and whatnot, and things like that. And it was cool, but I've found over time, the more that I have sort of spent more time with myself and with my art and nurturing that, I have become more and more a hermit. And over the last few years, that's literally what I tell people. I'm like, I'm actually like a closet hermit. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe not a closet hermit anymore, just a straight up hermit. But and moving more and more into the country, like Patrick and I, we live out in Newton now, which is between Millbank and Milverton, and lots of people know Animes and Millbank.
And a beautiful alpaca farm out there.
There is. There's lots of cool farms out this way. And I think it's the solitude combined with the opportunities now to just spend so much time focused on creative work, that is what we gravitate toward, and that quiet place that feels like sort of healing from all the things that we've been through in life, because we both have our histories and our stories and our baggage. There's something now where we just crave quiet and peace, and focusing on that and sustaining that for our kids, our family overall, is now like our number one priority. And we've been talking about that a lot actually lately, and trying to figure out how do we just sustain things and live more and more in this zone of sufficiency instead of trying to like chase and chase and chase, and really just also show the kids that this is what's possible if you figure out who you are, what your voice is, and that you have this ability to create and really like do whatever you would like to do. But yes, so coming back to your question, Marshall, it does present awkward situations. And there are times where like I don't always feel like going out or doing the thing that we may have committed to doing. But I also think so many people are feeling that because of the isolation through the pandemic. So there's so many different factors that kind of feed into it. But I still, there are times where I surprise myself too, and I push myself to go out, and then I enjoy just chatting about just regular everyday things. Like the kids were home again for 2 days this week because there were snow days, but they're not regular old snow days anymore. They still have to do online school, and that really does, it sucks for them.
I love the honesty there. I was like, what is she going to say? Is she going to say what we're all thinking? Yes, she is.
Yeah, it really does suck. And that's the thing, like, just having kids is like one of the most humbling and just like everything changing experiences in life. So I think that too has sort of shaped our home life and how we approach everything in general. It's just from this baseline of it has to be practical and it has to like not tax all of us energetically. And because we figured out like we just don't operate well when we're trying to move too fast.
That is such a good thing to realize too. And I remember moving quickly when I had my first child and she was a baby. And I remember thinking, okay, when you go to meet with your friend, you know, your best go meet up with your best friend or whoever it might be, for the first time with the baby, is that, you know, I need to lay out the idea that this isn't about us. If this baby cries or needs something, everything today is about this baby. And before any other of your friends have kids, that's a hard thing for them to grasp onto. I've told Marshall many times, I made sure that I didn't tell, like on the phone with my friends, I made sure I wouldn't talk about my kids. I kept asking about their lives. Like, not that they dictated that. That was a choice I made because I didn't want to lose my friends and be the boring person that talks about your kids all the time. Do you know what I mean? And now that they've all grown on and all their families have grown and they've had children, when I've talked about that with them, they're like, you totally could have mentioned something, but it's that sort of protecting this space that you have with your little family as well.
Yes.
And understanding like, this is what we do in our time, you know, and if we are going to go and enter your space, it is going to be all about the kids. But again, I took a big piece of that part of my life with me now and still hermit very often because I want to protect the quiet time and the family time and not overcommit to all the other things that you could do if you want to. Like, I mean, we were joking about the Breaking Book Club here. How many book clubs have you been invited to in your life that I can't? I'd like to read a book when I can, but I cannot join your 10 book clubs. No. Happy that you guys can. Please go do.
How do people do that though? Like, I honestly,
we have other hobbies. We're creating art and we're doing other things, right? Yeah. That was quite a ramble I had there, but I think it made sense.
Yeah,
right?
There's a lot of good stuff packed in there.
No, that was really, really good because I was like, yeah, I hear you. Like, I don't know that I could join a book club right now without feeling a certain amount of anxiety.
I don't know if I can commit to having that read.
Yeah, no, I can't. I don't know what I'm doing like next Tuesday. So I thought,
but it's not going to be a group activity.
Right.
It's not, but I can tell you. Yeah.
I thought we could wind down, Roshan, by you talking about, somewhere along the way, you made a decision, very conscious choice, that you weren't going to succumb to the rat race, right? And that when I look at your art, your paintings, and when I look at your poetry, that for me represents freedom. Like, that is freedom, but that didn't come without an enormous amount of work and sacrifice and probably a cost as well. But you somehow got there, eh?
Thank you. I feel like you're calling out so much that just is incredibly affirming and moving for me, Marshall and Sara, both of you. This has been just an amazing conversation. There has been definitely sacrifice. I would say I've picked up and put down the rat race a couple of times. Thought I had sort of semi-retired and then realized that you don't make a lot of money doing the creative life solo.
But everybody wants art.
You don't?
But I know. It's a shock.
Yeah, I know.
I really should have known ahead of time. But I'm always optimistic, and I think sometimes naive too in that optimism. I don't know that I want to change it, but I feel like I sometimes have to call it out because there's some things that I've done where I've just thrown stuff at the wall and it sticks, and sometimes it really doesn't, and it dribbles off the wall, and you're like, okay, I got to clean that up.
Or throws itself back at you.
Or it throws itself right back in your face, and you're like, oh, okay. So yeah, like I would love one day to focus on art. I think that is really the singular goal at this point. How we get there is a bit of the muddling through at the moment in that liminal space. So another liminal experience. But I do think that that's where you find freedom. Like when you can align your day-to-day with what really drives your sense of purpose and joy. And you can kind of detangle from any sense of obligation or needing to do something for somebody else, and not needing to sound self-serving, but like where it's not driven by somebody else's agenda or, conditioning. That does feel like freedom. It sounds like freedom to me. So that is the goal. We'll see how close we get over the next few years, I think.
Bonn Park is made possible with the support of the Kitchener Public Library and the Kitchener-Waterloo Community Foundation.
Our show is produced by Sarah Geidlinger
and Marshall Ward,
with audio engineering by Sarah Geidlinger.
Bonn Park's original music is by Alan Lung.